Good morning, everyone. We will have a debate review today, this morning, of Abiogenesis against Special Creation, RJ Downard against NephilimFree. Anyone that wishes can join and we can discuss what they have said in the chat yesterday night and make this review happen. So enjoy and have fun.
Hey, I'll start the clock. RJ, what do you think?
Okay. First thing I can start off with is that absolutely nothing that Nephi and I say today is going to change any of the science facts. The scientists don't pay a damn bit of difference to any of this stuff. I doubt if Jack Szostak or John Sutherland or other researchers in the abiogenesis field or any other scientist will ever see this. So we just have to remember that this is an entertainment that's going on between two talking heads or a talking head in a black screen, as the case may be. We have to remember all of that. Another thing as we get into the discussion will be that none of the field workers in abiogenesis are actually anti-evolutionists. All the information that we'll probably be covering are things that have actually been generated by the evolutionists themselves because they want to know what the actual facts are. They don't want to make up a model. If they just wanted to make up a model, they could be creationists and have it all done with, and they wouldn't have to worry about it. So, why are we having this debate at all? It's precisely because the origins question is an enormous trope in anti-evolution apologetics, going back for 100 years or more. And I call it the origins or bust argument, which is the idea that if you can just disprove the origin of life, then you've short-circuited evolution completely. You don't have to worry about dinosaurs turning into birds or hominids or anything else that happens in the fossil record. Therapsids, my favorite reptile-mammal transition. And that ends the argument all in one fell swoop.
Well, first of all, evolution has nothing to do with abiogenesis. There are two different fields of study, of investigation. So atheists, they love to mix up the things, the issues, and when the matter comes up about abiogenesis, then they want to bring in evolution as an explanatory mechanism, and that, of course, is not true. So abiogenesis has to find a solution on its own, and evolution has nothing to do with it.
It certainly starts out, I'm going to give you a little bit of history first. It starts out with French anti-evolutionists and in the biogenesis era, which Nephi may bring up in his discussion. The idea that does life just spontaneously generate if you have like a bowl of mud and you let it sit there long enough with little worms and critters crawling out all on their own? And in the days before bacteria were discovered and before microscopes were even available, it wasn't at all obvious that that couldn't happen. So there was a big debate going on. There was a thing called preformationalism, that organisms were starting out as little teeny baby homunculi inside of seeds. And there was a lot of stuff which turned out to be just claptrap because they didn't know anything about what was going on. Well, you got Louis Pasteur entering the picture. He's the super guy developing pasteurization, the idea that you can sterilize things to make things healthier. And he eventually weighed in on this issue because if you sterilize the flask and make sure that you're killing organisms in it, then you can let that sit there till the cows come home and there ain't going to be little worms crawling out of it because you killed them all off and life doesn't generate spontaneously. This was nicely settled. However, before you go jumping on the, oh, well, that gets rid of evolution part, Louis Pasteur himself recognized that there was a snag if you tried to play this card too much. And he warned people, I think it was in 1865 or so, in a lecture to the French Academy, where he was saying, don't try to pin your belief in God on this biogenesis issue, because what if it turns out that you're wrong? What if the scientists actually do figure out how life originated naturally? That's the way we would phrase it today. Does that mean you just disprove God? You got to flush it down the toilet? So he was warning them, don't overplay this little hand on here. So Pasteur certainly didn't think about that in that way. It's interesting that German evolutionists tended to be origins or busters. Ernst Haeckel and others, they all obsessed, oh, we've got to figure out how life originated in order to get anywhere on it. Well, Darwin and Alfred Wallace bypassed that whole argument with evolution because they realized
Well, no, you don't bypass it with evolution because abiogenesis cannot be explained through evolution. And secondly, yes, you are right. Even if abiogenesis would be proven to be true, that wouldn't disprove the God hypothesis. It would just mean that life can come from non-life, but that doesn't, of course, explain all the other issues of origins that have to be explained.
You don't have to know how life originated. It could have been a miracle. It could have been natural. Who cares? Because they're looking at what happens afterwards, looking at what existing life is and working backwards from it. And they both independently came to natural selection as a drive wheel mechanism, and didn't need to bother about how life originated. From Darwin, maybe a warm pond, something yeah, but they didn't know most of the factors, so they couldn't figure any of it out anyway. Uh,
Well, the most important question is, of course, if there is a God or not. Evolution is another topic, and if evolution is true, that doesn't disprove God either. That is also true, but it is a fact that many atheists today they rely on evolution being true in order to justify their unbelief in God.
Wallace, ironically, became a kind of origins or buster when he became a spiritualist. He never was a Christian. He gave up on that when he read Tom Paine back in the when he was a teenager. But he became a spiritualist when his sister became a spiritualist, and that was really popular stuff in the 19th century. So he decided that the origin of life was one of those things, in addition to consciousness, that was the result of the spiritualist supermind that existed somewhere out in spiritualist mindland. And that was the belief that he continued with. Meanwhile, Darwin was not a spiritualist. In fact, he was kind of like a mini Ghostbuster. He helped expose some fake spiritualists in that during that period. So there's a cultural context to why these issues were being discussed the way they are. So how does the origins or bust argument roll? You've got a bunch of usual suspects that because we haven't cracked the problem, they're still around. One, will expect Nephilim to bring it up. If he doesn't, he's behind the curve. The chirality issue, which is that molecules that are left-handed bending or right-handed twisting play preferential roles in biology. And it depends on which level you're talking about between proteins and others. And there's some areas where chirality doesn't matter much. But it was a very big issue about why is living systems using one system over another when if biology had to start out that way. It's now known a lot more about how chiral molecules of the prebiotic stuff can be generated by ultraviolet light in space, that there's a whole bunch of factors that tend to skew certain kind of molecules towards certain kinds of left-handedness or right-handedness. And
Well, RJ, first of all, the chirality problem has not been solved. It is still there. We don't know how on a prebiotic Earth ribose to produce RNA and DNA could have just been generated to be right-handed and amino acids only left-handed. The sorting out mechanism exists in life through transaminase reactions, but this reaction, obviously, because it is enzymatically performed, was not extant on early Earth. So there was no sorting out mechanism, and this is a huge problem. You can claim that it was solved with what you're explaining right now, but the truth is it has not been explained. That is a huge abiogenesis problem amongst many, many others.
that means that now, although it's not resolved as a problem, it's way less of a nail biter than it was 10 or 15 years ago. Another
Nonsense. That is not true. It is as much as a problem as 10 or 15 years ago, and there is no way this to be explained because there was no selection mechanism on the prebiotic Earth.
other one that may come up is where did the DNA information comes up? That's one of the big things. An awful lot of anti-evolutionists are computer programmer types, and they just go all oogly googly over the idea that DNA as a coding system had to have a designer to it. But we're dealing still with molecules that do stuff, and they have stereochemical relationships. And information is not like a 0 and 1 in a computer program. It's not arbitrary. You can't just play around. Molecules do stuff, and that's the drive.
Yes, they do stuff, but we know that complex specified information only comes from intelligence. Blueprints to make machines and then factories only come from intelligence, RJ. There is no way around this. That problem has not been solved. You can just delude yourself and try to delude others, but the fact remains, and it is unsolvable by natural means. Period.
Deal of evolution. Another one, of course, of the early experiments of the Miller-Urey people in the early 1950s, which were showing that if you take gases and water vapor and lightning bolts and the like, you can generate a lot of organic material that shows up, including amino acids. Turns out the more accurate you make the early atmosphere, the more amino acids and prebiotic components you can make, and more reliably. So those.
This is pure nonsense. 8 of the 20 amino acids have never been synthesized, neither in the experiment made by Miller and Urey in the 50s, nor in the subsequent experiments in 2008, I think. 8 of the enzymes of the amino acids have not been synthesized, and the making of amino acids to life, to cells, is extremely complex. The metabolic pathways are extremely complex, and some of the amino acids, like tryptophan, is extremely complex to be made, and is no prebiotic route how this could have happened, how the right amino acids amongst over 500 that supposedly were extant on the early Earth, how they were selected, the ones that are used in life. These are huge open problems. So you can snake in any kind of materialistic explanation, RJ, but the fact remains that amino acids cannot be synthesized naturally, unguided, without the enzymatic and metabolic networks.
Those are all clues of things that might be going on early in the system.
No, there are no
but
clues.
Focusing in on the 1950s research
Bullshit.
is irrelevant because it's not the 1950s anymore. So let's jump up to speed to where we are today in the 21st century. First, we'll stipulate something. Dun, dun, dun. We don't yet know how life originated. Oh, RJ has just conceded the whole point. No, RJ admits, and in fact encourages you to know, that it's a really hard problem. It's really hard. It's way harder than lightning bolts in a thundercloud. And do you know, we don't know how that works either. We know, I'm not kidding, that it's known that lightning is electrical. They go out in a golf course with a lightning rod, you can in the middle of a lightning storm, you may find out just how electrical a lightning is. But how do clouds separate positive and negative charges before to make enough differential to produce the lightning bolt? It's not really known how that works. It's difficult to model even in a supercomputer. And we're just talking water vapor and dust particles in there. Now, does that mean because we don't know how lightning is generated inside of a thundercloud that therefore the Zeus or Thor model is now back onto the table? Yeah, no. You can say maybe it's miraculous or maybe it's a purely natural phenomenon. Let's work it out. Another one that's a good analogy here is Fermat's last theorem, because that doesn't even involve biology. There was a mathematical formula that was put down by Fermat in the 17th century, and he said, I have a really neat proof of this, but it's too big to fit in the margins. And 400 years of mathematicians banged their heads against the wall trying to figure out whether that was true or not. And it finally got cracked just a few years ago by a mathematician who was not even a big league mathematician, who finally proved Fermat's last theorem. Some of the biggest mathematicians, Euler and Bertrand Russell and others, had taken a whack at Fermat's last theorem and could never get anywhere with it. It even involved masses of mathematics that didn't exist in Fermat's day in order to make this proof. So we still don't know whether Fermat could even have had a proof back in the 17th century that would have been potentially working, even though we now know that it is proven to be true. I think it's a conjecture about the number of prime numbers and relationships of squares and things like that. You can look up Fermat's life.
Wow, RJ, why don't you come right straight to the issue? Fact is that life requires nitrogen, and there was no mechanism to fix nitrogen on the early Earth, and lightning doesn't work either. And there are very complex metabolic mechanisms in order to fix nitrogen, and that is an unsolved problem.
Last theorem. So we've got the issue that it's a very complicated problem. How are you going to resolve it? Are you going to build a vat the size of Connecticut and stir the pot for 10,000 years? Maybe, but that may not be feasible. So what we can say is that however it happened, life existed very shortly after the late heavy bombardment that formed the Earth. It's about 4 billion years ago. And
Nah, it wasn't that much. It was maybe just about 6 or 6,500 years ago. So you are way, way far away from reality, RJ.
it sets off. We got 2 minutes. Yes. We know that the amino acids, nucleotides, formaldehyde, an awful lot of the organic components that make up living systems, not the proteins, are generated artificially, naturally in abiotic conditions.
Well, just not true. Nothing of that what you're saying now has been proven in the lab. None of the basic building blocks have been ever synthesized in the laboratory. So you're just lying here, RJ. Not true.
We know it was bacterial, not something more complicated. In fact, it's billions of years before you start getting bacteria. Now, here is where we get into the difficulty for Nephilim.
Well, no, they say that's about 200 to 500 million years to get bacteria. But as Margulis said, the step to go from the basic elements to the first life is a bigger step than to go from the first life to humans. So there is, even if you have 500 million years, it wouldn't happen, especially because molecules they break down they get asphaltic. They do not complexify to become useful building blocks to make life. So you are in fantasy land, RJ.
Free trying to use this argument. He is a young Earth creationist that's trying to compress the time frame too much. That won't work. You get heat problems, as got given called attention to in the live chat there, that utterly make it impossible to compress too much time into too little space. So any model of the origin of life has to pay attention to the chronology of it. That life began about 4 billion years ago and spent a long time before you even get cyanobacteria.
Yeah, you love fairy tale stories, don't you, RJ? Cyanobacteria are extremely complex. They use nitrogenase, enzymes, they do photosynthesis. Probably you have no clue that photosynthesis is irreducibly complex, that the water evolving complex is irreducibly complex, that photosynthesis requires 26 different protein systems that are extremely complex and need to be joined together. Science has no idea how oxygenic photosynthesis evolved. So, hey, get a life. Come down to reality. You are just talking nonsense here.
Yeah, and another long time before you get early multicellular organisms and then complicated things in the Cambrian on. The other issue is, and this is why I wanted the argument originally just to be about religion, not special creation, is that none of the religious documents of the world that profess to discuss the origin of life ever got those facts straight.
Well, Genesis got it perfectly straight. It said how it happened. God created life on earth in the 6 day creation week. And we know that intelligence can do complex things, can make machines and factories, which cells are. And natural, unguided means cannot. So you're wrong, RJ.
Not just the Bible, it's everybody gets it wrong. So the reasonable surmise is this is because they were human beings making up perfectly fine stories as best they could under the circumstances, but they didn't have access to any alleged designer, even if there was one, because they didn't get their score straight. And I think I'm about 30 seconds shy, so we can hand it over to Nephilim.
Yeah, so your introduction was very weak, RJ. You made up pseudoscientific claims which are not backed up by science. Science has absolutely no idea how life came from non-life by unguided means. You are just living in fantasy land.
Awesome, awesome. Here, let me reset the time. That was a great opening. 1 second. All right, NephilimFree, are you ready? You hear me?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right.
I'm trying to screen share something. Hopefully you can allow that somehow, James.
Yep, it's showing.
Great, thanks. Okay, so I didn't prepare anything for this debate. I've been way too busy doing lots of other things. But I don't really need to. A couple of points to make. Um, my opponent skipped providing any evidence for evolution and abiogenesis, rather, and just gave you a storyline. He says chirality is less of a problem today. It's still a problem. Alluded that information can be created naturally. That's scientifically impossible. And he says it's difficult to model in a supercomputer. Well, you betcha. If scientists can't even model abiogenesis in a supercomputer, knowing the three-dimensional shape of molecules, like they can model computer molecules in a model and can't get things to build the way that they want to, then you know it's a problem, all right? And so he says, we know it was bacteria. We don't know any such thing. What you've heard is a lot of storytelling, just storytelling.
Agreed.
Abiogenesis is scientifically inept idea. There's nothing in science that actually supports it. What you're seeing on the screen is an example of atheist denial of science. They will admit that this little hand beater on the right side, which has about 9 moving parts, or 6 maybe, was designed by an intelligence. But they'll look at this machinery in the cell, which is submicroscopic and has camshafts and timing gears. And they'll
Correct, NephilimFree. ATP synthase, which is the energy generating turbine in the cell, is irreducibly complex, and science confirms that it had to be there when life started. So that's a huge problem. How did such complexity come to be? That is an unsolved problem, of course. Proteins, they cannot emerge randomly, unguided, without a creator.
they'll say there's no reason to believe that was designed. But the thing on the left is vastly, orders of magnitude more complex than the device on the right. And if that's not enough, the systems of the biological systems of the world are so complex, in fact, that to believe in abiogenesis after you've seen illustrations like what I'm providing on the screen is nonsense. Here you have a motor protein walking down a microtubule of the in a cell.
This is amazing. And proteins, when they are synthesized in the ribosome, when they come out, they are tagged, and then the cellular machinery knows exactly where the protein has to be transported. They are loaded on these kinesin tuxes, and the kinesins, they bring them to the end destination exactly where they are needed. That is, of course, all. It is comparable to a cellular molecular GPS system. So, how would evolutionists or materialists explain how that came to be? Where did that information come from to direct the proteins to the right place in the cell? And of course, that had to be already there at the beginning when life started. The proteins, they need to be at the right place to make what they do. They cannot be just randomly anywhere in the cell. They need to be interconnected into metabolic networks to perform their actions. There are production lines where each protein has to be at the right place in order for the production being feasible, where they manufacture intermediate product and then hand it over to the next protein where it's also processed, and that goes on. Usually these metabolic pathways, they take various proteins until the end product is made. And when that product is made, it has to be also inserted in a higher order of complex machines and biological things. So that kind of complexity, of course, can only come from intelligence and not by random unguided means.
Putting 1 foot forward and another ahead of it. These quote unquote feet bond to this microtubule, heel first, then toe in a specific way, and then release in a pattern because they were designed to do it in a pattern. This is design. Here's another kinesin machine. This is a video provided by Ken Dill, major university biologist, of microscopic little robot men, you might want to call them, walking down microtubules in a cell, carrying information and energy and other things to and fro in the cell on a superhighway in the cell. They walk, putting 1 foot forward, 1 foot forward, 1 foot forward. Some of them have something behind them that helps keep them upright because of the load they're carrying. This is unbelievable technology. At the sub-microscopic level, you need, these are, what you're looking at is so small, they can't actually watch it happen in real time with present technology. They have to model it with a computer based on the shape and electrical.
You see, that function of walking needs ATP at the right place in order to have that walking movement. How did that emerge prebiotically? And you need ATP, which is also a very complex molecule, which has to be made with 3-phosphate, which is made in ATP synthase, and nanotubine, which was just mentioned by NephilimFree before. So the energy cannot be just any kind of energy. It has to be energy in the form of ATP, which is funneled to the enzymes and the proteins in order to promote the action.
The chemical bonds.
So this had all to be already present right from the beginning. The energy, the basic molecules, and the information. This is an all or nothing business. Cells are irreducibly complex. They cannot be formed by a chemical evolutionary random mechanism that takes time.
No. I'm not going to play this for you. This is a video of Dr. Ken Dill. He was one of the world's foremost biologists. He says he wants to cut this point to come across to you. The things we're talking about in cells are not just like machines, they are machines. 20,000 different kinds of molecular machines in your cell. Real machines. He says, this is not an allegory. These are real machines. So machinery has function and purpose because it's designed by an intelligence. Here's Dr. Ken Dill. You won't be able to hear him probably, but this is a connector core. And the complexity of this arrangement of genetic information, what's going on here, is so mind-bending. I can't even, I wouldn't begin to have time to describe for you everything that's going on. What you see right now, the cell is just getting ready to split the DNA molecule. It's getting ready. The information is getting all ready. It's almost ready. Everything's almost precisely organized and exactly right. Just about ready to start. We're almost there. Go. And there it goes. The information being carried down the microtubules, all set off like horses at a start gate with a pistol. They all take off at the same time. This is design. There are several different types of DNA repair mechanisms.
And not to talk about the DNA replication, also in prokaryotes, is irreducibly complex. They require at least 30 different proteins working in a joint venture together. And even if one of these proteins is missing, like helicase, then you have no DNA replication. So, and if you don't have DNA replication, you don't have perpetuation of life. So the question is, how did that ingenious engineering come to be? It had to be right there when life started.
Mechanisms. What you're looking at is just one of numerous ones. Each one of these things that you see is actually represents a highly complex molecule comprised of numerous atoms. Numerous. And they operate in unison in patterns in order to do things like repair DNA mutations, breaks in the DNA molecule, etc. The complexity of this is mind-bending. To believe that this kind of thing arose by chance, without intelligence, just happenstance. The molecules happened to get together, and they just formed equal pairs. And then it was the same on the left as the right. And then they managed to do these things to bind to the molecule, to untwist it, and then to cut it, and then for these other molecules to come in and seize hold of it, and then eat back on the molecule, and then go back in and write the right base pairs in place, then reassemble everything, and then all go away.
Not to mention that the cell cycle requires 16 checkpoints in eukaryotes, and if one of these checkpoints is missing, then the regulation breaks down, and the cell cycle cannot occur as it should, and that has to be there all at once. If one of these regulators is missing, you do not have a cell cycle, you don't have cell replication, and you don't have cell perpetuation. So again, cells have to start and become alive fully operational. A stepwise fashion of implementation of all this kind of complexity is simply not feasible.
That just happens. It can just happen. No, it can't just happen. These things require intelligence. Here's a different DNA repair mechanism going on. All the molecules in here are different than the ones you just saw. They're all highly complex molecules. They look like little globes, little, children's toys. But in reality, what you're looking at are very complex molecules, extremely complex. Here comes this big PCNA factor, and it rebuilds the DNA molecule. I mean, these things, this is unbelievable complexity, way outside of man's box. We don't have the technology to design at the microscopic level machinery that can do this kind of thing in coercion, in a symphony of interaction. These machines before those, then these machines come into place, then they bond together and they do this and then they do that, and the other machines release and another types come and bond in together, and then they perform their particular functions, then they release and other machines come in to do it. It's a symphony of molecular machinery, all designed to repair the DNA molecule.
Not to mention that there is even electrical scanning where an electron is sent through the DNA, and when there is a lesion, something damaged in the DNA, then the electrical signal does not go through, and that then gives a signal that the repair machinery has to go there and fix the problem. How did that kind of complexity come about?
There are numerous types of DNA repair. Each one of them is stupefyingly complex. It's utterly ingenious. But now the abiogenesis, the science denialist, has to believe that all molecules bumping around can form this kind of stuff. Well, let me put it like this. In about 30 billion times the age of the universe, there still wouldn't be enough time for undirected molecules to bump around into each other and make this kind of machinery that operates in a symphony of functions.
Agreed, NephilimFree. As Steve Banner said, there is the us problem. That means if molecules are just laying around on a biotic Earth, they do not become more complex. They actually disintegrate and become asphalts. That's a huge problem and a real blow in regards of abiogenesis proposals.
Never, ever, ever will it happen. Ever. Life has been proven to be a product of design by 20th century technology. In fact, here's this bug. It has gears on its rear legs, so that when they snap their legs forward, the bug shoots straight forward. Instead of leaning to the left or making a miss, instead of flying off to the left or to the right, he goes exactly straight forward, because when his muscles snap, those gears keep his legs together in unison, and they operate exactly the same on left and right. That's design. It's design. Everything about biology is design. Nothing that you see is a product of natural processes. The idea is appealing. It's easy to believe if you cut God and design out of your mind, but it's not possible scientifically. You might want to believe it is. That doesn't make it so. It might have been plausible to believe that molecules bumping around in a warm puddle of water could form themselves into something as complex as biological life in 1840, not in 1970, not in 1990, not in 2010. The idea has been destroyed by modern science. It just can't be true because of what we know today. There's many things that disprove abiogenesis. The fact that DNA is a product of linguistics, it possesses linguistics, algorithms, and information are proofs that it was designed. Because the semiotics, that is, applying a symbol to matter and interpretation of meaning from a symbol, is a mental process, not a chemical one. Therefore, chemistry cannot have made the information, linguistics, and algorithms that is DNA. It is scientifically impossible. It cannot happen. Molecules cannot perform mental processes. Chemistry happens only in the present. Every chemical reaction takes place only in the right now. There are none happening in the past. There are none happening in the future. They all happen in the present moment. Therefore, chemistry cannot have produced information linguistics or algorithms because they require forward thinking, thinking about the future to be accomplished and how to go about it. That's a mental process that requires forward thinking. Chemistry has no potential to see the future. And this is one of the great problems for abiogenesis and evolution in general. And here's why. Because many sequences of information along the DNA, whether they're separated by hundreds, thousands, or millions of base pairs away from each other, are interdependent with each other. Imagine standing in one place on a big flat highway in Arizona. And you're standing there, and 22 miles down that highway is another guy that your existence depends on him. How does that happen? Because, you see, biology is chemical, and abiogenesis, evolution are chemical, purely chemical processes. But molecules can't make themselves interdependent with something they're not in immediate proximity to. All chemical reactions happen with molecules that are in immediate proximity to each other so that they can bond or interact with each other. They must touch, quote unquote, touch each other to do so. But genetic strings of information way down there, miles away from the DNA molecule, are interdependent with each other. Then, in other words, the one over here on the left, the guy standing on the highway in Arizona, his existence has no function or meaning, whatever, without that guy standing 10 miles down the road.
Yeah, not to talk about that a large section of the DNA is making mRNAs which have regulatory function. They are used to regulate genes when they have to be expressed, and that kind of information has to be there right from the beginning. It's like a library where there are millions of books, and there has to be a software which actually selects which book that has to be opened and the information extracted, the blueprint information which is used to make machines and so forth. So all that has to be orchestrated right from the beginning. And if that is not the case, then genes cannot be expressed in the right order, and there would just be chaos.
Nothing. No worth whatsoever. Because he's interdependent with that one. And the one that's only a mile away. And maybe the one that's 40 miles away. Because that's how DNA works. Genetic information is interdependent over vast spaces of distance on the molecule. But chemical reactions only take place when molecules are in immediate proximity to each other. Therefore, information, linguistics, and algorithms of DNA cannot have arisen naturally by chemistry because matter forward thinking. Matter can't say, I'll bet there's a guy down the road 10 miles away that if I was to hook up with him, then we could do a function. It can't happen that way. These and so many other things, this is scientifically impossible. Okay, so is that my time?
Your time.
Okay.
Great presentation, NephilimFree. Agree with everything you said.
Great.
All right, awesome presentation. All right, here, let me get the clock set up right here. We're about to move into the open conversation phase. I'm gonna set the timer for an hour. So y'all can have sufficient time to go back and forth.
Eu aposto que você já se fez essa pergunta. Por que eu nunca consigo o corpo que eu quero? E não pode ser tão difícil assim. E eu te digo...
Since NephilimFree closed out, let's start the open conversation with RJ. Ready?
Yeah, I definitely have a couple issues, but the big one right off the bat is the matter of the chronology. That the physical forensics indeed show that there's only bacteria to start with for billions of years. Now, Neff doesn't believe that because he's a young Earth creationist, but he cannot claim that the scientific community agrees with him on this. The only thing he can do is to argue that, no, his biblical mandates and the notion of science shows that. So,
RJ, consensus is totally irrelevant what it says. What we have to do is just to look into the science, into the evidence, and from there make our inferences and conclusions. Just to say, oh, because the majority of biologists and scientists say X, then X must be true. That's now not how it works, RJ.
What evidence do you have that, for example, therapsids existed at the very beginning of life, and when exactly was that?
Well, I would say cytotaxis or directed assembly is, but you said only bacteria, this, only that. You're telling us stories from your head, RJ. You're not. You said
No, I'm not.
you said.
Hold on one sec. I think that the volume, Neph, it seems like yours might have gone up just a bit since we did the test, and that might be part of OBS. But if you're able to turn it down just a smidge.
Okay, well, I'll move my mic around a little further away. Maybe that helps some.
That'll help. Thank you.
Okay. So, I mean, you said I don't remember the word you used, but you said the forensics, the biological forensics that we have prove that my timeline is wrong. What are you talking about? I don't understand what you're talking about. Forensics supports young Earth creation because
there are no therapsids
molecules don't stand around in the
Precambrian rocks.
environment breaking down. Not biological ones.
There are no therapsids in Precambrian rocks.
Okay, there's no dinosaurs in Cambrian rock either.
Right, they weren't alive in the Precambrian. There are bacteria.
So now you're trying to
Precambrian
debate the
rocks.
flood. I'm not going to debate the flood with you. The flood explains that. But we're talking about abiogenesis. Okay, we're not talking about the fossil record or geology. Okay, we're talking about whether or not natural, undirected chemical processes.
Oh, well, let me make this clear.
Yeah. Nail him down, NephilimFree. Don't let him distract to other topics. You're right.
You got all the time in the world to talk, RJ. You got all the time. Okay, so we're talking about whether or not undirected chemical natural processes are able to explain biological life, not the fossil record, not the flood. Okay.
Then let me get you pinned down. If it proves to be the case that in fact you are wrong on the flood, you're wrong on your chronology, and there are in fact billions of years between the lions and tigers and bears and therapsids and dinosaurs and the first life, which is bacteria, is that going to be a problem for your argument at all?
It's just not possible to be a problem. You and I debated this.
No, that isn't what I asked you.
We debated this
if you
subject
accepted
once
that,
before,
would it be a problem?
Okay, let me start again since you love talking over me. We debated this subject once already, about 6 months or 7 months ago, and I handed your hand to you about that one, like I'm going to.
No, you didn't.
So we're not talking about the flood tonight. We're not debating the flood, RJ.
But RJ, you have to face the fact that either life emerged by a fortuitous accident, spontaneously, through self-organization by unguided stochastic coincidence, natural events that turned into self-organization in an orderly manner without external direction, chemical, non-biological, purely physical dynamic kinetic processes, and reactions influenced by environmental parameters, or through the direct intervention, creative force, and activity of an intelligent cognitive agency, a powerful creator. These are the two possibilities. There was no evolution, there was no natural selection, there was no chemical evolution, nothing of the sort. So, hey, face the fact that chance hasn't the mechanisms to create such complexity that is required to have a first life going.
What you need to do is show scientific validity that chemistry explains biological life for us to believe is scientifically plausible that what would exist biological could arise by undirected chemistry.
That it literally doesn't make any difference to your argument if only bacteria existed for billions of years before complex life? That has no effect whatsoever on the validity of your argument that you can just shunt all of life after that off of the scope completely and ignore it.
That is totally irrelevant, RJ. What you need to explain how life can come from non-life by unguided means. That's it.
You're welcome to believe that. I know that's part of your paradigm, part of your storyline. But what you have to do here is show that natural undirected chemistry is able to explain the biological systems that exist. You're not going to be able to do that.
Let's dive into the other question that I wanted to ask you.
Now, I want to ask you a
Why don't you let him finish, RJ?
question. You've asked 3 or 4 already.
I'm answering it. I want to go into the...
You are gish galloping and diverging the dialogue, RJ. Stay on topic.
A one-sided debate where you ask all the questions.
I am going into it.
I sit here smoking my cigarette,
let me answer
trying to answer. It's not going to be that. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question.
Wait, what's that? Okay, just how many questions were asked on each side? Just because I know both of you.
He asked me undirected biological processes. I am going to state that the codon assignments are not arbitrary, that they are natural and originated by natural means.
That's bullshit, RJ, and you know it. Science has absolutely no clue how the assignment of the genetic code of the codons to amino acids could have occurred without guidance. That is an unsolved problem, and it cannot be solved by unguided means. That's a fact.
I never asked you a question.
Let's go ahead with your question.
Yeah, I answered 4 questions, I think. I didn't even ask a question. So, but my question would be this. I know that you love to appeal to the scientific community's consensus opinion, and really, to me, that doesn't matter a bit. But you do know that Eugene Koonin is at least acknowledged that that he says this: despite considerable experimentation and theoretical effort, no compelling scenarios currently exist for the origin of replication and translation, the key processes that together comprise the core biological systems and apparently prerequisite of biological evolution. The RNA world concept might offer the best chance for this resolution of this conundrum, but so far cannot adequately account for the emergence of inefficient RNA replicase and the translation or the translational system.
There's no explanation.
Eugene Koonin, one of your favorite, one of your poster boys.
What year did you write that?
This was 2007.
Does it matter? Does it matter when he wrote it? It's still true today. Science has absolutely no clue how all this machinery could have emerged randomly.
Okay, it's 2020. What's his opinion now?
So his opinion is still the same, RJ. He has no clue, and science doesn't have either. And in 50 years, there will be no explanation by natural means either. It's an unsolvable problem.
The same.
So really?
So yeah. So you understand that your
You've read his recent papers?
You understand. I never got to finish asking my question. The question is, you understand, don't you, that your camp acknowledges they have no functional scenarios to explain biological life? It's all pure speculation.
You didn't listen to me, did you?
Right?
I conceded that we do not know how life originated in the same way we don't know how lightning is formed in a thundercloud.
Yeah, but you still believe it nonetheless, isn't it? Even if the evidence doesn't demonstrate that it's even possible, you still stick to that explanation.
Excellent. Yes, I know that. But
now let's talk about
biological systems, not just life as a whole.
We don't know anything about how life could have emerged randomly. Even the basic building blocks of life, science has no clue how they were, how they could have formed prebiotically.
They don't even know how proteins arose naturally.
Yeah.
They don't even know how ribosomes came into
quite.
Not quite. What are you talking about? That's true. Even the amino acids, we don't know how they came about. So you are just in fantasy land, RJ.
They don't know how helicases formed or topoisomerase formed naturally, or any of the other machinery of the cell. They don't have a working scenario for any of that.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's go right to the core of the codon system. Do you claim the codon assignments in the DNA system is arbitrary or not?
Of course it is arbitrary. It is assigned to amino acids. How did that happen? By unguided means, RJ. Think.
Just, you can ask me that question, but I would prefer that you actually answer instead of skirting. My question is, can you acknowledge
you can ask
that?
One more time, Neff, and then we let him. Okay. We're going to let him answer your question, but then we've got to let him ask you a question too.
Can you acknowledge that your own camp admits they don't have working models for the development of biological systems? I didn't say an organic life as a fixed feature.
Actually, I will dispute that. If you're going to trot out a 2007 quote from Koonin, I'm going to want to deal with the Koonin that's written in the years since and other researchers.
Go ahead. Let's see that evidence, RJ. I'm keen to see it. Go ahead.
No point. He is addressing what the situation was 13 years ago. This is like somebody today drawing on a quote telling us how beta is clearly better than VHS on videos, forgetting the fact that we're now in streaming video. it's moved on.
Yeah, streaming video has moved on. Abiogenesis research hasn't moved on in 70 years, RJ. We are even farther away today than 70 years ago. Science has absolutely no clue at all.
There's an enormous amount of research, which I don't think you read much of, on where people are working out. I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions on other areas, but I want to at least get back.
Let me respond to what you just.
RJ, let me quote what Steve Benner said in regards of that issue. He said, "We are now 60 years into the modern era of prebiotic chemistry. That era has produced tens of thousands of papers attempting to define processes which molecules that look like biology might arise from molecules that do not look like biology. For the most part, these papers report success in the sense that those papers define the term, and yet the problem remains unsolved." And this is the stand today. The problem remains unsolved, RJ. What are you talking about? You're in fantasy land.
Sad, too.
Yeah.
If I provided a quote from 2018, you'd say, "Oh, that was so long ago." The evolutionists do
It'd
this
be
all
newer
the
than
time.
2007.
You've done it for every time I've ever quoted.
We gave you a chance to respond. Now we're going to go to RJ's question.
Yeah. I'm trying to get to an issue about the codons. remember, for those of you who need a little primer here, the DNA and RNA operate of nucleotides, triplets of which code for amino acids. This is a core problem that has to be resolved in order to explain the origin of life. Now, an awful lot of the anti-evolution...
And has it been explained? No, it can't be explained, because assignment always comes from intelligence. When I assign a meaning to a letter, that is an intelligent process. That doesn't come by no intelligence. It's not possible, RJ. Get a life.
Evolution arguments relating to codon assignments are assuming that they are somehow completely arbitrary. They're like
yeah, they are arbitrary, RJ.
Zeros and ones in the computer code that are completely arbitrary except for external intelligence. Whereas by a natural model, no, there are reasons why codons get assigned the way they do. So,
no, they don't. You're in fantasy land, RJ.
I would like to ask you, Nephilim, do you claim that the codon assignments, the 22 amino acids that are assigned in natural systems,
RJ, demonstrate a peer-reviewed science paper which has solved that issue and explains how it could have been assigned by natural means. There are no such explanations.
In our particular species are arbitrary or derived by natural processes?
I think they were ordered by the designer.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's pretty obvious.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
think you
obvious.
can get a code system from natural chemistry. I'd love to hear you explain how that's possible.
Is it possible for a GCU to code for anything other than alanine?
Likely, but that doesn't mean that natural processes can create a code system. Okay, a code system.
That's the same thing as to say that a translation book from English to Chinese could emerge randomly by unguided means. That is just ridiculous. And that's so obvious, RJ.
So it requires a coder. So let me ask you a question. Do you think it's plausible? Can you explain why it's plausible to believe that particular factors, or rather that genetic information in one piece of one loci of the DNA over here on the left could be interdependent with information would be, let's imagine that the DNA molecule is scaled upward massively, so that we're looking at the DNA molecule as though it were a ship's rope that holds an anchor from the mid-1800s. You know, a rope is big around as a football or a bigger soccer ball size rope. Okay, let's imagine that's the DNA molecule, and that thing is about 200-300 miles long, right? Now, so the DNA molecule, let's say we travel 19 miles and we come across some information as in the form of knots there, and that information is completely interdependent, functionless, worth nothing, without the information that's 196.4 miles down the road. Can you explain how chemistry can make molecules that have never come in contact with each other interdependent with each other for a function?
Oh, because, well, which example would you be talking about? What is an example that you're giving?
The whole DNA molecule.
Okay, let's take our DNA molecule. We are 4 billion years away from the original living system. That's a lot of stuff that's been changing. We're a quarter of a billion years away from the earliest therapsids.
Well, RJ, how did the genome be expressed when the machinery wasn't even there yet to make the transcription through RNA polymerase and then the translation through ribosome? Every information transmission system that is sent, that is encoding, sending, and decoding is always something set up by intelligence, and that is precisely what in the cell happens. The genes, they are sent through, they are transcribed into messenger RNA. They are sent to the ribosome, and then they are translated in the ribosome into amino acids. If you don't have all this machinery all there, fully developed right from the start, then nothing goes. That is an irreducible system that had to be fully set up right from the beginning. And there are over 25 extremely complex macromolecular machines involved in this whole process. And you want to tell me that this emerged randomly on the prebiotic Earth? Hey, get a life.
2 billion years away from the endosymbiotic properties that built up eukaryotic cell.
The endosymbiotic theory, RJ, has nothing to do with abiogenesis. It is the claim that some kind of early bacteria or so engulfed and then become a eukaryotic cell. So you are diverging again the issue.
It didn't all happen once. Now, I know you...
It had to start all at once, RJ. That is what you need desperately to stick to, claiming that chemical evolution by a stepwise fashion emerged and produced the first self-replicating cell. That is just fantasy.
You want in your young Earth creationist model to have it all happen at once.
Yeah.
Everything occurred
It's an all or nothing business, RJ. Why doesn't that get into your head?
Week, and there's been nothing but deterioration since. That's a niche view that is unsupported by geology, astronomy, a bunch of sciences. In addition,
what has astronomy to do with abiogenesis?
To the biology, and Eugene Koonin would call your young Earth creationist model claptrap. That
it's not about young Earth creationism, RJ. It's about how life started. If it's billions of years ago or it happened 6,000 years ago, you are again diverging from the real issue here.
Not even on the board. It's not an alternative to natural evolution.
Eugene Koonin has...
And natural evolution has nothing to do with abiogenesis, RJ. That's very basic.
Not written anything that says we've figured out how biological systems are.
Yeah, no. Eugene Koonin is one of the few who is really honest and actually admits that science has no clue. In his book, The Logic of Chance, he claims that abiogenesis is a failure. How do you deal with that, RJ?
No, because he wants to know what the facts are, and we don't have that resolved yet.
Yeah. That's a materialism of the gaps. We don't have the results yet, but in the end, it must be a material cause. Isn't that, RJ? And God hasn't any business whatsoever and at any time, isn't it?
He does accept natural common descent for the same reasons that he is looking at the other.
No, he says that it's basically in the realm of a miracle.
Here.
Nothing has changed since 2007.
Do you know what is his explanation? A multiverse. And that is also fantasy land, RJ. You are living in fantasy land.
I'm sorry.
Does Eugene Koonin deny natural common descent?
Are you appealing?
Yes, he does. You didn't even read his book, The Logic of Chance. There he outlines why common ancestry doesn't work. There are 6 or 7 issues which cannot be solved by common descent, like the machinery for self-replication is different, the membranes of eukaryotes and prokaryotes are different. There are so many issues, and he acknowledged this. You need to read his books, actually, RJ. You don't know what you're talking about.
Hold on, we
is
have
deep time.
let's
You appeal
okay,
to him
so
as an
RJ
authority.
RJ asked a question, and let's entertain the question for a bit, and then in promise we'll give you a chance to ask another question.
So RJ, you're just appealing to deep time, saying if we have enough deep time, we can imagine that, well, it must have happened. That's not an explanation. You're not providing any scientific reason for us to believe that abiogenesis is an explanation for biological systems. You're not providing anything. Appeals to the fossil record, that doesn't help you. Appealing to deep time doesn't help you. You've got to be able to explain the things I showed you on the screen with natural undirected chemistry.
Show and tell.
That's what I'm expecting you to be able to do. To give us a reason to believe that science has provided an explanation for how natural chemistry can have produced the biological systems of life. You're not going to be able to do that. You haven't attempted it. All you've done so far is
back. Okay.
All you've done so far is appeal to deep time and a fossil record.
What's the most recent abiogenesis research that you've read, Neff?
I don't answer test games. Okay. So
I know you don't.
Right.
Is it correct to say that you haven't read an abiogenesis paper written in the last 5 years?
Why is that, RJ? Demonstrate one abiogenesis paper which actually demonstrates how even the basic building blocks of life could have emerged prebiotically. There is no such science paper, RJ. Science is totally clueless and in the dark of how life started by natural means. Why do you not acknowledge this?
Okay, when's the last time you read a paper by Stephen Jay Gould? When's the last time you
since
read
he died in 2002, he hasn't published much.
When's the last time you wrote a paper by Kurt Wise? Have you read one?
Oh, I've read a ton of Kurt Wise. I criticized him a lot.
Time?
Did you read?
Well, NephilimFree, I wouldn't go back down that road. I would just bring him back to the question how life started by chemical evolution. That's the crux of the issue here.
Criticized Kurt Wise a lot.
Did you read one this year? Or it's out of date? See, I can play the same ridiculous games. Get to the meat of the problem. Start showing that natural chemistry can explain the existence of biological life.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, RJ.
See,
go ahead, RJ. Explain it to us.
And let me give you
we are
one
curious.
More, maybe
we want to know.
It's called cytotaxis or directed assembly. What it means is the cell in your body exists because you got them from your parents. And your parents got them from your parents. And your parents' parents got them from their parents. And this goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. And how do we know that? Because the cell is not developed by genetic information. Are you listening or just having fun?
Oh, I'm listening.
Okay. All right. So nothing develops the cell. Cells divide. Okay. They don't develop. That's the problem. So if genetic information and biological processes don't develop cells, then it's because cells divide. And if cells divide, and that's the only way cells come into existence, it's because there was an Adam and there was an Eve and those cells divided. So can you explain how it's plausible to believe that abiogenesis is scientifically valid when we know that cytotaxis or directed assembly is true today?
Hey, RJ, just answer to NephilimFree. Don't play games.
I've been putting up here is a little teeny sliver of the abiogenesis research that's appeared in the last couple of years. I'll tell you.
So what does that mean, RJ? That abiogenesis is true because there are thousands of or hundreds of thousands of science papers dealing with the issue, and that makes it true? Oh, come on, please. Don't play games.
That all of the stuff that you're bringing up is about 1 billion years farther down the road, or even a few hundred.
It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant, RJ. All what you have to do is to provide just one science paper that explains how life could have emerged by natural means. There is no such a paper, and nonetheless, you stick to that proposition. Why, if the evidence doesn't lead to that direction?
Million years in some of the core cases, I don't think that that more than about half of the DNA repair systems, for example, existed.
Yeah, they had to exist right from the beginning because life couldn't start if the error rate wouldn't have brought down to 10 to 1 error in 10 billion, and that had to be there right from the beginning. Otherwise, the mutation rate would be too high and the cell would die. How do you explain the error check and repair systems right from the beginning, RJ? There is no naturalistic explanation for this. Get a life.
In even Luca, let alone in the initial life system.
Yeah, and so you say 1 billion years later we have cytotaxis or directed assembly. How do you know that, JR?
Give me an example of a directed assembly cytotaxis involving an organism. Let's talk a specific.
Well, do I have to go over it again? Cells aren't developed; they divide.
Mm-hmm.
You understand it, right?
Yeah.
That's called directed assembly or cytotaxis. Okay. Right. So you said that's something that arose 1 billion years later.
Oh no, the bacterial one would have been fairly early on.
Oh yeah, sure, of course.
What are the
how do you know
literature?
How do you know that?
No,
I asked my question. I asked a question. Yeah. How do you know that? How do you know that directed assembly arose 1 billion
what bacteria are, and the earliest life forms are bacterial, and Luca would have been a bacterium.
Okay, so because they're bacteria, that's how we know that directed assembly.
RJ, do you know what the complexity is of the simplest bacteria that we know of? It is, they have 1.3 million nucleotides. These are free living cells which can synthesize the 20 basic building blocks of life. Now, do you know the odds to have such a genome by random chance is 1 to the 10 to the 700,000 of power? That is in the realm of the absolutely impossible. How do you deal with that, RJ?
Evolved 1 billion years later?
Oh no. That's a different issue.
That's what I'm asking. So answer the question I'm asking.
Who are the major researchers on the evolution of cytotaxis?
No, I asked you a question, Joe. You said cytotaxis or directed assembly is something that developed 1 billion years later. I asked you, how do you know that?
Don't try to get me caught on a thing where I'm trying to catch up on
So RJ, you are just making things up, and it's fantasy.
I would not say the bacteria. I misspoke. I will say that cytotaxis would be a very early feature, so I probably put it at 100 million years or so after the early.
And how do you know that? How do you know that?
And you know that because what? Your idea requires that it be so, not because of any science, right?
No. If you want to tell all of the scientists doing research on Luca that they're not scientists, go right ahead and do so.
That's not the point. That's not the point. They do not have any answer, RJ, but you seem to have. So you know more than science. Is that so?
I said
yes,
you believe that
you just
because your views require it, but not because of any scientific evidence.
Are you saying that all the Luca researchers just refuse to believe as you do just because they just...
Well, they actually admit that they do not have any explanation, and there is no explanation even at sight, RJ. They are in the dark.
Want anything else, or are they forced by the data to the position?
Do you know, RJ, why they still perform abiogenesis research? Because they become funding, and it's hundreds of millions of dollars, like in Japan, for example. They just do it to have a day job, to make the money, to sustain their life and their families, because most probably they even know that abiogenesis is impossible. But hey, science has to go on. It needs funding.
That they do.
So let me ask it again. So you said that's something that arose 1 billion years later, and I'm asking.
No, I misspoke. Don't say the billion years again. It would be a component of Luca.
That's what you are claiming all the time, RJ.
What, hundreds of millions of years?
Okay, good.
2.9 million, 1.4 million years ago, maybe. It doesn't matter. Hundreds of millions of years ago. Let's say that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So how do you know that? Do you know that because your idea requires that it's so, or is there scientific? Let me finish the question before you talk.
You just asked it, and I already answered it.
No, I'm trying to ask it like 6 times in a row, but you won't stop talking while I'm asking the question. You're very nervous and upset.
Okay.
So the question is, how do you know that? Do you know it because do you believe that because your idea requires it to be so, or because there's scientific evidence that cytotaxis developed somewhere?
All bacteria.
RJ, I can forward. You don't have an explanation.
Use that. Therefore.
So what? Of course they use it. That doesn't explain how it came to be.
or it's a data point to be discussed.
Yeah, it's to be discussed, but you will never find an answer because there isn't one.
You believe it because your theory requires
Yeah.
it.
I believe that cytotaxis is
You believe it because you just want to be it true. That's all, RJ.
cytotaxis, and therefore things that have cytotaxis have cytotaxis.
Oh,
right?
yeah. And that's an explanation.
Yeah,
Okay.
but you believe in cytotaxis evolved because your theory requires
I
it.
suspect
You couldn't possibly have
cytotaxis
scientific.
evolved.
NephilimFree, it couldn't have even evolved. It had to come fully developed, or either developed by God or just by chemical unguided means. There was an evolution.
Right.
I'll leave it to the
Excellent.
researchers
And-
to
Yeah, you leave it to them, but you nonetheless, even if there is no explanation, you just believe that it's true, that it must have been naturally.
me more about why they think what they do and how early they think it is. So you tell me, what research have you read on the origins of cytotaxis other than creationist accounts?
That's completely irrelevant, RJ. What science paper do you have that you can demonstrate that they actually explain how it originated naturally? There is no such paper, but nonetheless you believe it. Why?
I haven't read any. I don't need to. I just know
You
what
don't need to.
cytotaxis is, right? And I know that cells divide and they split the organelles and everything divides, and that's how you get a cell. And that's what I need to know is cells do not develop, they divide. That's all I need to
Give
know.
me another topic for
So-
rocks number 2.
So here at least you say you believe that. But if we were to turn everything
And atheists say they don't base their worldview on faith. Isn't abiogenesis just a belief system, just based on full thinking and faith? Yes, that's what it is. And RJ, you are just confirming it and demonstrating it.
guns on everything that you believe about abiogenesis, you admit also that you believe that happened.
Yeah,
without scientific
exactly.
evidence. You
Yeah.
believe this happened.
Yeah,
without scientific
exactly.
evidence.
No,
You
no, no,
believe
no,
No,
that.
no. Of course it is, RJ. What did you bring to the table that is empirical evidence or demonstrates or even shows a possible route? You've not brought to the table absolutely anything.
No. Don't try to slip that one in. I will tell you, I have not done an in-depth study about the cytotaxis systems and the discussion of the evolution of it or not. It may turn out
So you don't know that evolution wasn't affected then, right? You don't know even that.
that not much work has been done on it. It may turn out that there's been an enormous amount of work done on it. I'll do that research. Have you done any research on that? And if so, from what sources?
I just told you I haven't.
Okay,
But
so we're on the same playing field. When it comes
No.
to cytotaxis, we're both at 0.
No, absolutely not, because
Didn't you bring it up, RJ? So you're bringing up issues which you don't know anything about, which you didn't study? Is that true?
if you read the Bible, God created them in the beginning, male and female. There would be no development of cytotaxis, and that's what we see. Cells
And
don't
are
develop.
you
Cells split.
dogmatically requiring that there never be an evolution of this, and you will reject in principle?
So you, RJ, you are not dogmatic at all, isn't it? You are open-minded. You permit the evidence to lead wherever it is. That's not what you're demonstrating.
Any evidence that they did evolve?
It absolutely supports the scriptures, and that's
What I asked you.
That's amazing to me. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, it
So
is.
my view has scientific support. Cells don't develop because God made original cells. There were cells already in the beginning, formed cells.
Yeah,
That's why cells divide.
yeah,
They don't develop. And that's a beautiful thing.
yeah. Everything had to start fully set up from the beginning. Otherwise, nothing done.
So the Bible is vindicated on that matter. Okay. So, but you
How about
need to
sex?
provide.
NephilimFree, I don't think it is good to bring up the Bible because atheists, they discard the Bible as an explanation a priori. But I think what has to be shown to RJ is that science has absolutely no clue how the mechanism to cell division could have started. And when there is no explanation, that's not a God of the gaps argument. It is that the evidence points out that natural means don't work. And when they don't work, then there is an alternative explanation, which is intelligent design.
Scientific reason to believe that information, linguistics, algorithms, the nanotechnology machinery of a cell, all these things can arise natural processes, and I'm waiting.
Yeah. Go ahead,
How about
RJ.
sex? That I'm assuming is design.
Yeah, sex is the queen of problems of evolutionary biology. But we are not talking about sex. We are talking about abiogenesis, RJ. Why don't you stick to the topic?
In that, do you think that there has been any evolutionary origin to sexual reproduction in eukaryotes at all?
No,
There is no explanation how sex evolved, RJ. Bring me one paper which is not making just storytelling.
I think the origin, the natural origin of sexual reproduction is a preposterous idea. Natural selection couldn't possibly play such a role in such a process as that, whereby undirected, minuscule change to an organism, to its anatomy, would be met with.
So you're biting his diverging the topic, NephilimFree. You should have brought him back right to abiogenesis and not started to talk about sex.
Yes. A corresponding mutation that happened to change the anatomy of other examples in its population to fit, to match it just by
and
chance.
that's what you think is required, huh?
I think that's preposterous, and I think that mutation developing both male and female organisms at the same time, I think that's preposterous. That's to me is a cartoon idea.
Did you do any research on that to see what scientific work has been done on the evolution of sexual reproduction?
Yeah, science has no explanation, RJ. They have just made up stories. Can you explain what emerged first, male or female?
Yeah, I have researched some things. Have you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I did a whole Evolution Hour video on it a couple of years back. What scientist did you draw on?
What is plausible about the idea that mutation and natural selection are a mechanism for developing the anatomical differences between male and female?
Good question. Yeah, good question.
Bacteria. What are the when bacteria have sexual reproduction? What anatomical differences are involved in those?
We're not talking about sexual reproduction.
Oh, yes, we are. There are. That's where do you think sexual reproduction? You think it just occurs between vertebrates?
So, what is the plausible reason? What is the reason for
plants
believing
have sex?
That natural selection and undirected mutations are able to develop the anatomical changes that would make two biological systems that are different.
You're reading the mantras again now.
I don't.
No, he isn't. That is a relevant question, and you cannot answer it because science cannot answer it either, RJ.
To get outside the little comfort box.
JR, when I read, you know I'm reading. Okay, so I'm asking your question.
Yeah.
What is it
You're
plausible?
repeating, but
Why is
because
it
you're
plausible?
saying
Stop talking. He is talking, RJ.
same thing. It sounds even
One
as
second.
you
All right.
memorized it wrote.
Let's hear Neff, and then I promise to come right back to you, RJ.
Yeah.
So why is it plausible, JR, to believe that undirected mutations and natural selection are a mechanism that develops these structural design changes to organisms to produce corresponding but different anatomical features required for sexual reproduction? Go.
Boy, he has just compressed
You don't know.
a colossal amount of research on the diversification of sexual reproduction.
Oh, so the amount of research means that the problem has been solved. Again, great answer, RJ.
Producing organisms, of which the field is mammoth. When you'd be talking about our sexual reproduction as mammals, sexual reproduction as amniotes, sexual reproduction as
You can list all the different sexual reproduction variants, RJ. Science has no explanation of even one of them.
fish, all of the different layers on layers on layers on layers on layers of it that you can trace.
So you're just distracting again.
In individual cases, which I guarantee you, nobody in the creationist community has gotten into that level of detail. I was trying to bring up where sex came from originally. Remember, he doesn't allow the chronology, so he never thinks map of time. The fascinating thing about how the actual scientists, like Matthew Herron, has done on the development of sexual reproduction and cellular systems in volvox and other organisms, it's related to both the evasion from parasites and also the structure of cell membranes. So the structure that cell membranes form are the things that are being hitchhiked on to produce sexual reproduction. And there's quite a substantial amount of technical literature that's been done in the last 10 years on this. I was citing some of it in my video from a few years back,
Yeah.
So
which,
what you've been,
none of which filters through
Again,
the creationist
again.
network
So the quantity of scientific research means the problem has been solved. Wow.
that Nephilim eventually copies in his little trope.
what you've just described as ideas about what must have happened. I didn't ask for ideas.
Yeah.
I asked you, what is scientific?
You need to explain how it happened, RJ, and you don't have an explanation because science hasn't an explanation. That's the fact.
Valid about the idea that undirected mutations in natural selection have the ability to develop the structural designs and anatomy to produce corresponding yet different anatomical features that are required for reproduction. How is that a plausible idea? Can you explain that to us?
Because it isn't an implausible idea. You don't have...
Of course it is an implausible idea. It is not to you because you want to be true, RJ, but there is no evidence for this.
Populations evolve, not individuals. It's a cliche. Kent Hovind falls into this same mistake. The idea, well, where could the first male come from? And you'd have to expect the first female to appear all at once, and so that they could come together to mate and make babies. That's not how the systems run. Any specialization, you ran on for a while.
Let's give him a chance, Steph.
Any specialized biological system, and you need to get past generics to actually talk about. Are we talking about aphid sex? Are we talking about trilobite sex? Are we talking about therapsid sex? Are we talking about gibbon sex? Which, that's a gibbon, that's a thing for you. What specifics we're talking about? Specialized features as to whether, for example, the penis is detachable, like in some bees, or whether or not some are sexual reproduction by scattering your sex bits the way plants do. All of the variations that take place, or have 5 sexes like the fungi, they're really kinky, or sex change operations that take place in some fish. You'd have to talk about the specific examples. And then you would discover that there is a technical literature on the gradual evolution and development and what...
No, there is not, RJ. Demonstrate me after this video just one paper which gives a compelling scenario. I bet with you, you don't have even one paper.
Genes are being shifted, what hormone variations are taking place in all of this.
All right,
And
so let's qualify it.
I'll ask let me finish my sentence. I invite everybody that's watching this video, even though they're not going to be including Jack Sostak and John Sutherland, to research every one of the topics that we're bringing up and learn the fascinating science that relates to all of them. All in your court.
Okay, so JR, so let me narrow it down a little bit. Let's talk about mammalian life, okay, or even reptilian sexual reproduction. What is plausible about the idea that natural selection and mutation could develop corresponding but different anatomical features that are necessary for reproduction? What's plausible about that idea?
What is plausible that Nephilim will ask exactly the same question in exactly the same wording, and after I give an answer that he doesn't like, he'll repeat the same question over and over.
Well, it is a relevant and pertinent question, RJ. Simply answer it.
Again.
No, you just said it's a big subject.
Until I don't give the answer that he wants me not to say, because he does not like the answer that I give.
Right, so you can't give an answer.
I've answered the question.
No, you didn't. You didn't give any relevant question, RJ.
You don't like my answer.
No, you just talked about...
There is nothing implausible about...
You are just making assertions, RJ. Where is your explanation? You need to explain how it happened.
The evolution of
sexual... No, you just talked about sexual reproduction happens variously with different types of living things. That's all you say.
Yeah.
I didn't address
that. I brought up Matthew Herron and Volvox.
So what? So what? Just bringing up that, throwing words into the wind, that means nothing.
I'm not a super duper expert, and neither are you, on the forensic details of even mammal evolution.
So you guys are talking about things that you don't understand. Got it.
Let me make this easy for you.
Are you? Here, let's get specific. Let's get specific here.
Why don't we just talk about something real specific here?
Are you claiming that the very first synapsid amniote was an asexual organism or a sexual organism?
No, I don't. I'm not arguing that there are creatures that reproduce without a mate.
That isn't what I asked.
I understand that, But let's narrow it down to something very simple, because now you're trying to drag this off into something biological systems that are way beyond the origin of life.
So well, you're the one bringing up mammals. That's
I brought up cytotoxicity.
But that's your fault too, NephilimFree. You should have brought him back to abiogenesis, and now you're diverging to evolution.
And you tried to turn it into sexual reproduction.
And so that's now going back to bacteria.
So give me about which
you and I both agree.
NephilimFree, on abiogenesis, you nailed him down. So you should have stayed on topic.
We don't know diddly on this.
What's plausible about believing that proteins can arise?
Good question.
Process?
Yeah, good question.
Which proteins?
Whatever, any protein that you want, RJ. Take the most simple protein on the early Earth. How did it come to be naturally? Explain that. You don't have an explanation.
Any protein. Proteins are functional molecular components.
Okay.
Molecular machines or machines.
Which one did you have in mind?
Proteins are either machines or components of molecular machines. How do they arise naturally?
Good question.
Abiogenesis is true.
Good question.
Proteins had to have arisen naturally. Can you explain the arrival of?
He cannot, or NephilimFree. He has no explanation to this question. Good question.
Proteins by natural chemistry without intelligent agency involved. Okay, no researchers, just how it's possible for molecules to order themselves.
I have to rely upon the technical literature by the people who actually do the work. I'm just checking down here, see if I can find an obvious paper that happens to specifically mention proteins.
How do proteins arise without intelligent agency?
That's your conviction, and it might even be true, although it still won't explain why all of the alanines have GCs as the first two codons. Oh, that's another little issue.
So how do proteins arise naturally then, JR? Do scientists have an explanation, a working model for how proteins could arise naturally?
I cannot read your paper, RJ, but NephilimFree is spot on. There is no scientific explanation how proteins emerge on prebiotic Earth.
Here's what we start off with. NEMI paper from 2017. Random sequences are an abundant source of bioactive RNAs or peptides.
Well, RJ, you need to start first to explain how the 20 amino acids were selected from a random pool of about 500 on the prebiotic Earth. Then you have to explain how they became left-handed. Then you have to explain how they bond together. Then you have to explain how they got the right sequence in order to fold together. Then you have to explain how the cofactors went inserted, how they formed the cofactors and then inserted in the protein. Then you have to explain how the different proteins joined together to become functional, to work in an interdependent way, because just one protein on early Earth would have no function at all. You have a lot of explanations to make, and science has no explanation whatsoever in regards of any of those questions, RJ. So whatever you will bring up, it is pseudoscientific nonsense.
Abiotically generated components that random parts of proteins can become functional. So
they become functional. How, RJ? How? That's just a claim. That's not an explanation.
So trying to figure out exactly what protein snippets that are occurring by natural assemblies, by variations on formaldehyde and other things which we know are generated abiotically, are doing what in that phase.
Do you know what they would do? Even if there would be such random polypeptides on early Earth, they would just disintegrate, RJ. They wouldn't form more complex stuff.
In the early phase of life. Remember, if you've been reading the technical literature on the origin of life, which I don't think you do much of, Neff, that...
So you are just playing games now, RJ. You try to diverge to point out to what NephilimFree knows or doesn't know. Why do you just not stick to the facts and give a compelling explanation, which you, by the way, don't have?
The last universal common ancestor from...
We are at the last universal common ancestor. NephilimFree asked you about the origin of proteins and not about Luca. Hey!
By which we've got stuff like your asexual reproduction system.
That's not what NephilimFree asked either. Stick to the topic, RJ.
That is unlikely to be the very early origin of life. So all of the things you're bringing up about complex molecules that are hundreds and thousands of nucleotides long aren't necessarily relevant to what abiotic systems are doing.
Oh, absolutely. That is absolutely essential. So you're just diverging again, RJ. You need to answer the question, how did proteins emerge on the early Earth? You don't have an answer. That's the truth.
We have had to work out, we, not me, the actual scientists, which include neither one.
They didn't work out anything. They don't have any explanation whatsoever, RJ. You are in fantasy land.
One of us have had to work through step by laborious step. All of this research, all of this research has been done in my lifetime.
Yeah, and nobody has brought up one explanation which is very compelling in regards of how proteins could have emerged naturally.
And none of that. What research provides evidence that arose naturally?
Yeah. Explain that.
That's what the research is about.
Yeah, it is about, but it doesn't have any explanation, RJ, and you don't have either.
The research doesn't show any such thing. That's nonsense.
Remember, I stipulated we haven't solved the problem yet.
Yeah, and you believe that science in the future will find out. That's a materialism of the gaps.
Right. No research has shown that natural processes are capable of creating organic systems. There isn't any. Let me screen share something with you, if I can.
And while you're screen sharing, I'll put my next question in the queue.
It will demonstrate this.
To take Pasteur's line, if it turns out that scientists can create life artificially, is he going to become an atheist?
So if I could screen share this.
So you're distracting again, RJ. What you need to demonstrate how science has explained the origin of proteins naturally. You can't.
Something I want to show.
Yeah, you just had it up there for a bit, and now it's gone. By the way, you look so cute with your laser eyes.
I'm sharing now. Should be screen sharing. So if somebody can do something to allow it.
So meta.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there it is. Okay. So this is what scientists. This is their. This is
good.
Their,
let's talk about that one.
This is what they describe as.
Put it back on screen so we can see it. I want to write that down.
I'm trying to go to it. Let me show you something. Because I want to show you what the researchers. Wait a minute, this is not.
Put the image back on screen so I can write it down, Neff, and everybody watching the show can write it down.
That's not the
there
screen.
You go. Keep that screen image there.
Oh God!
Okay,
can you talking for 30 seconds?
Well, it takes me a while to write things down, Buckaroo.
That's not what I'm trying. You're talking so fast. You don't even know what I'm doing.
I'm trying to write that down.
That's not what I'm trying to share.
All right, hold on 1 second. Okay, just 1 second. Let's take a deep breath.
That's not what I'm even trying to share, Jay. You're freaking out.
Let's see. So what?
I'm more curious than you are. Read this.
Neff, how did you?
Like,
what is going on?
Probably find it there.
You remember in Star Wars, The Rise of.
You brought it up. Now what's next?
Here it is. Now, if I can screen share this, please. I'm sorry, that was the wrong thing. I want to show you.
Well, maybe more wrong than you think.
In The Rise of Skywalker, where Rey goes into the cave and she sees like the reflection of herself of the reflection of herself.
Okay.
The reflection.
Oh, okay. And so by the way, there's also a scene like that in Citizen Kane. It's one of the famous things from 1941.
This is what I want to share. And I want you to help me understand the language that secular scientists use
and
when
what
they
are we
describe
saying?
things. The language that secular scientists use when they write these papers saying that they found reason to believe this or that happened naturally. We designed peptides with binary alternating sequences of peptides.
Why are we not seeing the paragraph? Why are we seeing the invasive mirrors?
They say the individual template peptides were designed to be soluble, etc. Observe the significant enhancement. Okay. These are things that they've done, at great expense.
Yeah, scientists have to do what they can with the work they have available.
Let somebody talk for 15 seconds.
Okay, 1 second. So let's do this. We'll give Neff a chance to share, but one thing we do need, Neff, is that, to be fair, like we are seeing, the Star Wars Rise of Skywalker like reflection of the reflection of the reflection of the screen. And so that's, I think,
information content 0.
Okay, let me try this.
Oh, there
again.
we go. Okay, so now we do see
There.
that.
Okay.
Just
Thanks so
leave
much.
it there.
Okay, all right. So when scientists, secular scientists, do things in a laboratory at great expense, throwing their experiments down the sink over and over again, buying all the purified elements and things that go into it, and trying as they might, and they come up with something that's not even useful for life, and they had to manufacture it. They use this language. We design peptides with binary alternating sequences of hydrophilic and hydrophobic.
Not only did they design the peptides, but the question is, if you have just one protein on the early Earth, it has no function at all. Proteins, they work in a joint venture together. And if you don't have a minimal proteome, which works in a joint venture together, you have nothing. So this is a huge problem. And I mean, anyone that has a clear mind can understand this. It's not difficult to understand.
Acid, etc. We used this. We did this. We manipulated this. We built this. We sequenced this. We modified the pH level as a precipitate. They modified the pH level. They even changed the polarity of molecules. The molecules had to be changed in their polarity, these amino acids, to test the sequence and specify we did this.
Now
we
keep
used
that
a sorter
image up, by
test.
the way, when I give my answer.
One sec. Let's
probe.
let Neff finish.
Yeah. So they combine things. They activate things. They purify things. They force things to happen. They're doing things to make molecules do what they don't naturally do. See, that's the language that they use in every science paper where they describe origin of life research, whether they're trying to show how this paper, for example, trying to show a plausible reason for believing that proteins form naturally. This is a recent paper, very recent.
Yeah, let's discuss that one.
So they don't state that we figured it out, JR. They state we used our intelligence to make these things happen.
Are you going to put a period in there somewhere?
What we got was not even useful to life, but we think that's how it happened in the beginning somewhere. That's
can I comment on this paper? And please keep the image up so everybody can see it, okay?
Yeah.
Now, what are they doing? Just as abstract. They designed peptides with binary alternating sequences. So they took components and arbitrarily stuck them together in a bunch of combinations and then would see what happened. What did they develop? We have investigated 4 different template substrate pairs and in all cases observed a significant enhancement of sequence selective and stereo selective amino acid addition. What does that mean in abiotic contents? Sequence selective, that the sequences and...
Well, on the prebiotic Earth, there was no selection. There was no selection. This is trying to sneak in evolutionary jargon where it does not belong. Chemical reactions, they do not select anything. And as Steve Benner said in his paper, the molecules they would just lay around on prebiotic Earth and then disintegrate. They would become asphalts. They would not complexify into higher order of macromolecular machines. That is just nonsense.
And stereo selective, what molecules they connect up with naturally were more of that activity. They did not design it to do the new activity. They just assembled like Lego blocks together to see what they would do and discovered on their own that they did more than just that. So I was saying that you are just not understanding the implications of that paper. And I do recommend everybody in the live chat.
There is no meaningful implication with what they are asserting. You need the right sequence of the amino acids. You need to have a mean to bond them together prebiotically without the ribosome, which does that job. You need to have the right sequence. They need to fold into a functional 3D form. They have reaction centers which need metal cofactors like iron and sulfur, which are ultra complex. Then if you have just one protein which is there, it doesn't do anything by its own. It has to be encapsulated in a membrane. It has to be working in a joint venture with all the other proteins. All this is not explained. So hey, where are you? Where are we going from this?
Write that down. Look it up. Nature Communications is open access, by the way, so you'll be able to get the full text. I may already have it in my bibliography. I don't know.
You just grotesquely misrepresented the science. Shame on you. That's shameful. The scientists acknowledged they built the freaking peptides.
Well, of course, that's what you do in an experiment.
They built them. They had to modify the polarity of them just to force them to bond together in a string. They did. They changed the pH level. They changed the solubilities. They changed the neutral levels. They activated things with activators. They had to purify. They do these things over and over and over again to force the molecules to bind. And then when they say purifying selection, they're talking about them as the purifiers, not nature. So, JR, what these papers that you discuss about abiogenesis don't show that natural processes can do any of this stuff. They show that you researchers with about $90,000 to burn can do it if they spend 2.5 months in the laboratory throwing $15,000 worth of chemicals down the sink every month to get it done. That's what they do. They didn't discover anything. They discovered that if they do this,
All right.
they can make something happen. They didn't show natural chemistry can do it. So again, the question is, what is the scientific reason for believing that natural undirected chemistry can produce biological systems, including the genetic information, linguistics, the functionality, the semiotics, the algorithms?
Now that is a moment, RJ. Rather than making stupid gestures, you should be carefully listen about what NephilimFree is saying to you, and then actually turn on your brain and think, because what he is saying is very relevant, but you are simply not willing to get it and not willing to permit the evidence to lead wherever it is, in special not permitting that it leads to design, which are, of course, have excluded a priori, and no evidence can convince you that design is the better explanation.
The interdependencies, you haven't given us anything. Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah. You don't have anything, RJ. You've not given anything. Just baseless claims.
Is ever going to be worth. I know from previous debates with you, Neff, that no fossils can ever mean anything. Nothing.
Fossils have nothing to say in regards of abiogenesis, RJ.
Nothing can ever disprove the FUD. Nothing can ever prove radioactive dating. And yet I know how bad you are at primary source documentation.
So that's not the issue, if he is bad or not. The issue here is, RJ, that you have no evidence whatsoever to make up something that is meaningful in regard of abiogenesis. Nothing. And you are not considering it. You are just blind to that fact.
That's why I wanted to get this thing down so I can look up the original paper. I know that you've miscopied numbers that you've gotten out of Snelling and others on technical papers that you've copied over the years. And it's like pulling teeth to get sources out of you. So at last we got a source.
Why are you lying about
me
now in a debate? You're lying about me now in a debate?
Nope.
That's ridiculous.
I'm insulting you. I'm not lying about you.
Wow. So insulting is a good method to make a point, RJ? That's just sad.
That's ridiculous.
We will, might be a decent time to go into the Q&A. I think you guys probably feel...
Okay. Does someone want to come in? The debate has ended. I think that RJ has not brought anything valuable to the table. He has just made up a bunch of claims. He started to diverge the debate to issues which have nothing to do with abiogenesis. He diverged to explain sex, but resuming, he hasn't brought up anything meaningful. So I think that was a very poor performance by RJ. Very poor really. And I don't think that this has moved forward in some kind of way close to explain abiogenesis. Anyone wants to come in to the debate that debate yesterday between NephilimFree and RJ? Otherwise, I will end my live chat here. Anyone? Anyone wants to join the chat to have a debate here to discuss that debate yesterday? I can do the mod, Smokey. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Come in, you two, and I will moderate the debate between you two. Feel free to join. That's a good topic. Yeah, just a moment. Anyone? I'm waiting. Who wants to join the stream? Come in. Hello, Evan. Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
Shalom. Okay.
Yes, hello.
Can you hear me?
First time. Yes, I can hear you well. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfect. I'm all the way down in New Zealand.
That's cool. That's fantastic to have international people here. Hello, good morning, Smokey. Yeah.
Shalom.
Hello, shalom, Smokey. Thank you.
Shalom.
Being here at my channel.
Shalom, brother.
Gavin has a little bit of
Shalom,
Gavin has a little bit of a delay because he's all the way on the other side of the world. You might want to let him have his say.
Yeah. So you decided to have a debate. So go on.
Well, let's let Gavin weigh in because here's what's happening. Gavin, tell the story with pudding. Go ahead.
It's a very short story with pudding. I challenged pudding to a debate, creation versus evolution, and we had a channel organized, we had a moderator organized, we had a time and a day, and pudding sent me an email and said, this Wednesday won't work for me. And that was it. Nothing. No reason, no excuse. A few weeks later, I got an email from him saying, what did you want to debate? However, it's too late. It's too late. I'm not going to go to the trouble of organizing myself to debate a guy who won't turn up, who runs.
All the time. And by the way, this is normative behavior for pudding. I'm sorry, Gavin, just to interject real quick. This is normative behavior for pudding. We've heard this like multiple times from multiple people that a debate has been set up, times have been established, and last minute or just off the fly, pudding will run away. He'll cancel. He won't have a good excuse. He'll say things like, "Oh, well, I was studying and I didn't sleep well, and oh, I have a crazy sleep schedule, and it's every excuse under the sun." I mean, okay, like I don't know what the guy possibly does for a living or anything, but he seems to basically just sit in that reused meth den that he calls his home and sit there and make videos about Maddox and the rest of us. He's got, like, seriously, guys, I want you to think about this for a second. He's got Maddox's name scribbled on his wall in his apartment behind him. And you will see, can you mute him? Can you mute him? Because I'm just hearing myself.
He seems to basically just sit.
Can you mute him, please? Thank you. Because he can't figure out.
Michael,
of course, he's not. Michael, he's not.
Michael, you need to put down the volume, otherwise you have echo.
Yeah, well, he's playing YouTube when he comes in because he's not smart enough to figure out how any of that works. So anyway, so he just, it's normative for him to run. He'll always have an excuse, sometimes many times last minute. He'll just jump up and have some reason he can't show up to the debate. He's a waste of time and a disappointment. And frankly, I'm just tired of messing with it. Like, I've heard this from multiple people of him pulling the same garbage, the same tricks, and he's just, I don't know if he's scared, incompetent, incapable. I don't know what it is, but it's just disgraceful. I'm kind of just sick of it.
Tangelo.
Yes, hello.
While we've got Speed of Pudding in the room, how about him and I do an impromptu debate with you moderating or Smokey moderating?
Look, I want everyone to see, I want you to look at what stupid Speed of Tweaker put in the side chat. Look at that. Look at what he said. He said, Spatchcock talked me out of it. I sent another email after do you see? Do you see the cowardice? He'll even admit to it. Do you see the cowardice? He even put that in side chat. He's that stupid. He actually admits to it that basically he ends up running away from a debate, being convinced by one of his moron garbage peers to actually do that. Isn't that incredible, Speed? Like, do you have no sense of self-actualization of how just embarrassing you look sometimes with these things you say? Like when you hold up a stack of books, you call evidence and then admit right after you haven't read them. Like, it's just like, what is wrong with your brain? Seriously.
I only have a few minutes here.
Oh, so yes, big surprise. Yes, big surprise.
Is my audio okay?
Well, yes, we can hear you.
Hold on,
Michael.
Hold on.
You're going to mute these other guys for me, or am I going to leave? I can leave.
No,
you can leave.
No, Speed of Pudding. Speed of Pudding. Now that you're in the same room with me, I challenge you right now to a debate, and the topic is Christianity superior to atheism?
That's a good one.
So you'll accept it? You'll accept it?
My channel when you want to do it.
No, right now. I
told you 12 hours notice. My channel.
Oh, come on.
Come
on. See, it's a waste of time. I told you.
Speed, how many minutes do you have now? Michael, how many minutes do you have now? Do you have 15 minutes, half an hour? How much time do you have now?
No, I have no bandwidth right now. I have no time.
Okay.
So, where is...
You should have just picked one.
Oxygen.
Where is that binging coming from, that robot noise? Is that me? No, it ain't me.
No, it's not you. Your bandwidth is fine, sir.
So, Otangelo, we could set it up. We could do it on my channel or your channel with just you moderating and me and Gavin and talk about atheism as a worldview and Christianity as a worldview. That'd be fun.
Okay.
But I need some notice.
Yeah,
I need notice.
I will leave my email on the chat so you guys can send me an email and set up the date, and I will put a set reminder on my channel. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think I have your email from before, so.
Okay.
That'll be fine.
I will put it for Gavin.
Yep.
If anyone else wants to set up a chat or so or a debate, just email me and we can put that on.
Okay. Good enough. I'll send you an email today. So have a good night, a good day.
Okay. Bye-bye, Michael.
Stay frosty, you half-baked tweaker dimwit. Enjoy your day.
Hi, Smokey.
Bye. You know, I don't have any patience for people who behave like that. And here's the thing. Let me tell you guys something. Like he might be a legitimate moron, and I think he is. But let me move beyond that for just a moment, because that's not my biggest gripe about Speed. at all. His stupidity is far from it. Let's face it. There's lots of wonderful people who are incredibly stupid that I give lots of respect because they have incredible character. They have incredible, humility or self-actualization or awareness. Here, my biggest issue with Speed isn't his intelligence; it is his character. It's that this running away from debates. And I want to draw something to the benefit of the brothers in the room and also the audience, that when he left, we're now challenging him to a debate. Gavin, did you not challenge him to a debate? Because that's what I heard. Challenged him to a debate, and what does he say? He says, we're going to have a conversation about this. He's afraid to debate. He's afraid to look dumb. And I think he's aware of it at this point. I think he knows he has failed masterfully at damage control when he's tried to debate. And we have laughed not only at the debates he's been in, but the damage control he tries to do. Like, it's almost better if he never said anything. Like, the damage control he did after his debate with Tony is exactly why he got the nickname Pudding, because he just couldn't stop saying it. Like we probably would have dropped it and forgotten about it, like after the debate, not made a thing about it. But he did like 3 or 4 videos just with damage control over the pudding analogy over and over again. Like he forced it on himself almost. Like he doesn't even realize, like, he is his own ridiculous parody. And so it's his character. It's his lack of ability to actualize what he actually is. And he condescends to us, to you, Atangelo, like you don't know anything. And then when we ask him questions, he never brings us anything. He started on my channel with conversations talking about how he has all this evidence for materialism and all this evidence that naturalism is true and naturalistic mechanisms can explain everything. And he's talking about getting all this evidence and all this proof. And now I talk to him and ask him, where's the evidence? Let's have a debate on the evidence. Let's have a debate like you were talking earlier about how naturalism and materialism have to be true because there's so much evidence for him. Let's debate that. He won't do it. He won't do it.
Yeah. And it's interesting, Smokey, that I went to his channel about 3 weeks ago. And after that, he never did let me in again. And he said that if there would be several people in this room, then he would not let in again. And I am asking myself, what is he afraid of?
Exactly. And why is it always a debate on his channel? He's pulled this garbage so many times. Like, I don't have respect for people that instigate the debate on their channel. The only debates I've ever had on my channel is for literally the people that have challenged to debate me on my channel. In fact, I think pretty much the only example I have, aside from my conversations, which weren't really debates with Speed of Pudding and Immutable, is this one coming up with my fellow Jew who wants to challenge me on the Sinai commandments. But that's because he challenged me on my channel and said he's fine doing it on my channel. It's never my idea. But Pudding, every time a debate challenge comes in or an opportunity to debate comes up, what is the first thing he says? Okay, on my channel with this much notice.
Guys, I how's my sound? Is my sound okay?
Yeah, you're good. You're good, Gavin.
Okay. We're hearing you.
Yeah. Apologies for the delay, but I'm right down at the bottom of the earth. I'm miles away. But I agreed to debate Pudding on his channel, and he still ran.
Yeah. Well, let's see if this time it goes up. I mean, he has my email. I left mine for you too, so you guys can email me and we can set up a debate on my channel. And let's see if he shows up.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, I've told him multiple times, dude, I'll debate you pretty much any time if you can just get a topic together. Like, it's like, and you saw me in chat. Pitch the topic, is materialism true? This is what he's been pitching to me from day one. So I want him to show up and debate it. Will he show up and debate it? No, he won't. So like at what point do I just basically stop taking this trash clown seriously? I think I've reached that point.
Is he still in the chat, Smokey? Is he still in the chat?
I haven't seen him. Chime up. I don't know what he's doing.
I think he left. I mean, there are so many people that I've seen that you can show them as much evidence as you want, but they are just closed-minded. They are not open to consider honestly the evidence and permit it to lead to whatever direction it leads. They are just saying, well, God cannot exist. We've not seen him. He hasn't proven to exist, and that's it. And you can bring them evidence after evidence, and they just don't get it.
Well, and I agree with Tangelo. That's why I like some of your argumentation, because I like that you're not just fixated on the science, which you're extremely heavy on, which is great. But at a certain point, you know when to transition it into a philosophical argument. And that's when I love that you start bringing in the naturalism of the gaps and stuff like that to show the fallaciousness of their stance. And I really appreciate that you mix both of those worlds in your argumentation. It makes you very, very powerful, in my opinion.
Yes, there is always a philosophical circle around science. And this is a major problem, Smokey, that many atheists, they do not have a consistent epistemological framework on which they start their investigation. And many, they say, oh, prove me God. How many times do I see that question? Demonstrate that God exists.
Yeah.
All the time they make the same questions. And then you have to point out that it's not about proving things that we cannot prove, that the material world is all there is. It's a meaningless question. We have to evaluate the evidence where it is more powerful. Where does it lead to? And we don't have proofs in any sense. We cannot go beyond the universe and see if there is something or not. We cannot do that. So we have just to evaluate the evidence and use abductive reasoning to the best explanation.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
Well, I think we move even beyond abductive sometimes, Tangelo. I think our argumentation of the essentiality of an intelligent mind behind the origin of life is absolutely deductive. Unless they can give me a third option other than mind or no mind, then we have a deductive argument on our side as far as I'm concerned.
Now take notice of this, Smokey. When I called in at the line with Jimmy Snow, he gave me 30 seconds to make a last statement. Then I made two claims, a positive claim and a negative claim. I said that blueprints, which are instructional to make machines and factories, both are always tracked back to intelligence. That was the positive claim. And in the second, I said the odds to have a minimal genome with 1.3 million nucleotides, to have a minimal bacteria, is 1 to 10 to the 700,000 of power. That is the evidence which demonstrates that the material unguided means are too random and the odds are too big that it could be true. And then he cut my call off, and then he started to laugh and to said, well, you see that he made again an argument of ignorance. And I addressed this at my reply to him yesterday, and I said that's not an argument from ignorance and incredulity. Well, why should I be credulous in regards of that kind of monstrous odds? I mean, that's not reasonable. If there are 10 to the 80 atoms in the universe and the odds to have a minimal genome is far greater, then why should we believe that? It makes no sense.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, I'm right there with you, Tangelo. Absolutely. Amen, brother. I think our argumentation for intelligence is far stronger than anything naturalism has ever produced.
Yes, and something else, Smokey. You can see the guy. He did make a video just to reply to me. He called me a dishonest Christian.
Yeah.
He called me a dishonest Christian. And then I asked him, hey, if you are calling me dishonest, by fairness, give me the time to reply to you and defend myself. He didn't even answer. So you see, it's not just about...
We lost you there, Tangelo. I think your internet bounced out there. We can't hear you, Tangelo, if you're talking.
I can hear you, Smokey. I can't hear Tangelo.
Yeah, I think he bounced out. I think his internet bounced out there. Yeah, Jimmy Snow is really embarrassing. Seriously, like, I mean, I don't know, like, even that little not email, but comment chain he had with Otangelo, you know, talking about, well, DNA replicates
evidence.
protein.
It's not just about.
Oh, is he back?
He was.
Is he back?
He was
Otangelo,
for
are
a
you back?
microsecond.
Yeah, I don't know.
Otangelo, we can't hear you.
Oh no. Okay. Well, we'll just wait for him to come back. Maybe was having some internet trouble there.
He might have to reset or something.
We do this for each other too. Like, Gavin, you know, like, one of us will have a problem with our stream, and we just stick around and keep it going.
well, I have exciting news, Brother Smokey.
Please, brother, share.
Yeah, I'm moving into a brand new apartment that's on the 3rd story.
Oh.
And I've already spoken to heaps of people in the US, and the connection is crystal clear. I'm 3 stories up in the air. So no more holding awkward poses and statue like poses and not moving from that position for 1 hour. I can roam around my new apartment and talk at will.
Outstanding. Well, we look forward to that, brother Gavin, and more debates for you to do then too. You'll have a better internet connection. We look forward to that.
Yeah, I've got one coming up middle of this week, actually, and it's is Christianity superior to atheism?
Beautiful. I think that's a good topic for you too. I like how you handle that topic.
Well, it's not that much of a no-brainer.
Exactly. Well, they have nothing. You know, ultimately, they have nothing to build anything on. You know, their worldview is just houses on clouds. I've said that many times, and that's all it is to me. It's just, you know, baseless pontification, feelings, noise, beliefs. You know, they basically accuse us of everything that they are, and then some. It's just
Yes.
Welcome back, Otangelo.
Yeah. I was disconnected. I got the phone call and the line was disconnected. But yes, I agree with you, Smokey. They accuse us exactly of what they are doing. That's exactly right.
Amen.
Yeah. And
that's true.
And that's
true,
a moment.
Otangelo.
That's a moment, Smokey, where I think we need to reply very energically how you are doing and call them out about their dishonesty. And that's what I am doing at the timeline. I said, hey, you are this dishonest, disrespectful liar, and liars go to hell.
Amen. There you go.
And when I say this, they usually stop accusing me.
Exactly. And that's the way to handle it too, is to cut them off at their knees with that stuff. Because you let them feel validated about it. I think that's worse. Like, as opposed to using some harsh words and calling them out and making them maybe feel a little bit of shame for what they've said and the stance that they've taken, as opposed to just being super passive, gentle, and kind. Let them walk away feeling validated in that stance. I think is worse. Yeah, I agree with you. There are moments where we need really to be energetic. We see Jesus also was energetic with the money changers in front of the temple. He got very angry and he was very energetic with those. And I think there are really moments where we have to be so as well and demonstrate that they cannot just make any claim against us which is not true, and then we just swallow it. Amen, brother. I'm right there with you.
Let's not forget Peter. Poor Peter. Poor Peter incurred Christ's wrath when he tried to intervene, and Jesus cut him to shreds. Get behind me, Satan.
Yeah, called him an adversary. That is quite. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty hefty for sure.
Yeah. So if Christ can do that and did that to, you know, his closest friends, his brothers, then I think we've got a bit of leeway to be able to, you know, strike back with some righteous indignation.
I think we need to be aware, and we need to really pray and just saturate ourselves in prayer for the use of discernment, because the key issue is to be the light of the world. And one thing I don't think the light of the world should do is validate evil or let it go unnoticed, or let it go not pointed out or not shamed for what it is. I have a hard time reconciling that in my Christian worldview as something I can allow, because I feel like I'm just taking if I say nothing, it's easier to say nothing sometimes. It's easier to be agreeable. It's easier to get along with people. But what are the cost of that? Like, this is what I was kind of, discussing overall the last couple days about Tog, is about, his channel over there. Like, what is it really doing? Like, he has a bunch of atheists, God haters, kind of unaware Christians who all come in there, bounce their ideas off of each other. No one seems to get challenged. They all just get validated in their nonsense and ridiculous views. And then it just compounds and compiles. Like, I have a problem with just not, now people accuse me of being a little too harsh on that, but Tog has been in a community with a bunch of other Bible believing Christians for over a year, and he still believes all this nonsense garbage and thinks it's okay. Something negligent has happened, in my opinion. So I can't act in that way. I have to find a place, and I ask all of us to not be the type that just, and I'll admit it, I probably go a little too far sometimes. I'll admit it, because I, of course, am a man and I'm fleshly and I have the ability to err. But you know what? At the same time, I'd rather go a little too far sometimes than not far enough, especially when it comes to words, because they're just words. And if those words end up convicting someone, making them feel shame about their life, make them, reflect upon who and what they are, whether or not they're making good decisions, I'd rather use a little bit too harsh of words sometimes. So I will sometimes maybe err, but I'm comfortable with where I err. And I feel ultimately it's important for us to call it out, because I think we've been going too long not calling it out. And that's caused them to feel that it's okay to keep doing it, to be dishonest, to attack us, to attack our God, our brotherhood, our people. And they should feel shame for that. For what we brought to the world and what we brought to society, they should feel shame for that.
The road is always that smoky. First, you have a debate with them about evidence. And once they are cornered and they know there is no way out for them to defend their worldview, then they start with these tactics. They ask about my credentials, about my education.
Right.
Then they start to calling me out as a liar.
Right.
Then they say that I am using God of the gaps arguments, that I am incredule, all that kind of stuff. But at the bottom, when they are really cornered, then they will call you out as a liar, as dishonest, and that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's how it goes. That demonstrates they're unwilling actually to permit the evidence to lead wherever it is. And God simply cannot have the food at their doorsteps. That's the truth.
Amen, brother. Amen. Yeah.
Otangelo, you're 100% correct in what you're saying. And it's always good to remember that the default position for the atheist, this is their default position. First, it's ad hominems, and then it's mockery. They can always fall back on those two positions.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And the true motivations are pride, unbelief, and rebellion. That are the three things that they are characterized with,
Amen. Pride's a big one. Pride's a huge one. Classic example, Tom Jump.
Yeah. Well, he is the worst debater that I've ever encountered, and he is totally irrational in everything that he says.
Yeah.
Everything.
Well, you caught that, Angelo. He argued with me, and he said that life could emerge without a universe, space, or time. I'm not kidding. He said it.
That's why I'm saying he's totally irrational. Totally irrational. I've never seen someone more irrational than him.
Agreed. And yet somehow people follow him. And you know what? I think it's all about his delivery. We actually see this in the Muslim world, where you'll have really garbage Muslim apologists like Zakir Naik. And if they can deliver with enough smugness or confidence, they can keep their audience, even if they're making no sense or not saying anything rational, because some people are sheep. And they will just follow. They will follow attitude and delivery more than they will points or arguments. And I've noticed this. It's kind of a sad state of affairs. I hope I don't get accused of that someday.
And you see, they don't really recognize how irrational that their view is. Look, the debate between John Maddox and the godless engineer.
Oh,
he was really exposed for the total lack of scientific understanding.
He was.
And then he goes back to his crowd and asks them how the debate went, and you will not find one of his followers which will tell him that he was terrible. You will not find one. They will all be on his side.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. Yeah.
And that's really incredible. And you see, when I called in at the Atheist Experience, and I said to Matt that I don't have to prove that something cannot come from nothing.
Right.
And that is obviously logic. And he did hang up on me. Everyone on the timeline then were screaming how I was destroyed by Matt because he did hang up on me.
You know, I feel like there's so many of these little atheist trolls in these chats that they're not really interested in any facts or evidence or anything, but they'll follow these mental degenerates like T-Jump like they're some sort of their own messiah. Like, and I mean, it's I guess in some roundabout way, Atangelo, maybe let me know what you think about this, because I feel like a lot of modern atheism is attached to ego. Like it's this perspective that they're somehow smarter than the rest of us. Like they figured out something that the rest of us can't. So so when we make them feel stupid, when we make them feel dumb, we undermine that. So we kind of detach a bit of their ego from their beliefs, because I don't think no one wants to feel stupid. And if you make them look stupid and they notice it and you shame them into being stupid, I think you almost can't help it. I think that forces some self-reflection, because I think what they'll do is if they feel any shame about it at all, they probably won't bring that same argument back again. They'll probably let it die. Do you know what I mean?
But Smokey, think about that. I gave a reply to Jimmy Snow, and I think it was a very rational, science-based reply, which just smoked all the nonsense that he said in his reply. Mm-hmm. Now, where is he?
Yeah,
where is he?
Yeah, where is he exactly? No, that's true. That's true.
I mean, if these guys were honest, they would actually acknowledge that we are right.
Right.
Because the evidence is so clear to them, and the Bible says it in Romans 1 that they just suppress the truth. They know what the truth is, but they just suppress it.
Amen. Amen. Atangelo, since I have you here and you're in the room, it's a little off topic, but it is a science question, and I kind of just want to run it by you real quick and see what your take on it is, because I've had a certain perspective. Do you mind? Do you have a couple minutes?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I was arguing, I think it was with Emo, along the lines of non-adaptive changes, which would be like the colors of flower petals or the shapes of leaves, where there's no real semblance of external pressure to cause the differentiation in shapes. Like, because evolution is very utilitarian, it would make sense that it should basically only have a different shape if the shape had a different purpose. So like as an example, in biology, we have our pedactyl limbs, our arms and our legs, and basically all terrestrial phyla all have the same limbs. They all have the same structure, but they all have different functions, which means they've undergone environmental pressures to change in their paradigm. Of course, this is how they see it. So, but the leaves, the shapes of leaves, the colors of petals, there's no external pressures to be placed on those to cause the difference of the change in structure to have a use. Like, there just doesn't seem to be anything inside the evolutionary naturalistic model that can explain this, why leaves would have different shapes. Like if they all have the same function, why do they need to have different structures? It just doesn't make sense inside their model to me. I wonder if you could give your thoughts.
Well, the same would apply to the colors of the eye. Why do people have blue eyes and others have brown eyes and green eyes? They don't seem to have any function, these differentiations. So I think that God made each of its kind, but with inbuilt ability of variation. And that is a pre-programmed process. But it's not just to have a variety, but which is eventually not useful. But many varieties, they are inbuilt to be able to become variations in order for the organism to adapt to the environment, and that is life essential. If you would have the first life without the ability of adaptation, that organism would die immediately, because we are constantly exposed to the different environmental conditions.
Amen. Yeah, and I've said that multiple times, that the biggest linchpin of their argument, which is the adaptation component, we recognize as theists, and I think maybe we should make a bigger point about this moving forward, because it kind of tanks their argumentation, is that the essentiality of adaptation is a necessary component to have life exist at all. It's a necessary design component. It's a design component. We recognize it as something that God put in place to make sure life didn't, go extinct as soon as it was created. This is one of those things that has to be there, as you so poignantly put it, Atangelo, and beautifully so. It has to be there at the beginning. It's got to be there at the very start, or else there is no life.
I have a link. I can put it here on the. It is a heavy science, so you can have, after our chat, a look at it.
Oh, cool!
And then you will understand more about what the mechanism is that I am talking about.
Beautiful.
It's about heat shock proteins. I mean, proteins, when they are exposed to much heat or so, then they can be destroyed. And there are mechanisms which dispose or destroy these proteins, or they catabolize them and then reuse them, or recycle the amino acids in order to be reassembled again, and then the amino acids are used to make new amino acids. So this is very ingenious.
Right. Yeah, and, absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna have to look through this. Yeah, very cool. Thank you for sending this, Atangelo. I'll read this today.
Yeah. But it's important to say that when an atheist or an proponent of evolution comes up and says, "Oh, microevolution leads to macroevolution," then you can know immediately this guy has no knowledge at all in regards of the mechanisms that are required to have organismal form and complexity. I mean, the processes, I am studying it in detail, they're very, very complex. But a general scheme, which you see through all life, Smokey, is the fact that there is always information which directs movement and action in the cell. It is always information driven. So when someone says, "Oh, it's just a chemical reaction," then you know this guy is talking nonsense, because it's not just genomes being a hard disk, as an analogy, to store information which makes proteins, but the whole process of keeping things alive is information based. And it depends on signaling from the exterior. I mean, the cell has sensors on the surface of the membrane which can make an interpretation of the information coming from the exterior, and then it will put in action several different signaling pathways, which will then instruct the cell how to adapt to the environment and what proteins that have to be expressed in order to make that adaptation.
Right. Okay. Wow. Incredible.
So it is all information based. Yes.
Atangelo, I'm 100% on board with adaptation within a species, but I don't see any evidence anywhere of speciation change or macroevolution.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
I think there is a very important distinction that you have to make. As soon as you bring up that argument, then atheists will say, "Oh, but we have seen macroevolution and speciation, where one pool of organisms cannot interbreed with another pool of organisms," and that is true, and that is macroevolution of second degree. But what is required is primary speciation, where one organism can morph into a completely new structure. And that has never been observed. I mean, like, for example, the Lansky experiment, well, they have adapted maybe the bacteria in these 70,000 generations, but you have never seen them morph into a different kind of organism or transforming into eukaryotic cells or something different. They are still bacteria.
Right. So macroevolution is still just a hypothesis. There is no hard evidence for it.
Well, macroevolution of second degree of speciation, where one population is distanced from the mother population and then becomes speciated in the sense that the two populations cannot interbreed anymore one with each other, that occurs, and that is also so-called macroevolution. So we can agree with the proponents of evolution in regards of that kind of speciation. But when they claim that, for example, new limbs or eyes or ears or new features of organismal complexity emerged, then we can say there is no evidence that this occurred, neither in the fossil record nor on a molecular basis.
Okay, good. Amen. That just that just confirms, my belief, my non-belief in the evolutionary theory.
Yeah, it is really so that God created each upon its kind, as it's written in Genesis, but did permit each kind to adapt to the environment and speciate up to a certain limit and level.
And I think maybe you could get a little mired in the mud, trying to argue some of that stuff to them. I think one of the core assumptions that they have to have inside their model that you can actually pick apart probably a little easier than the whole distinctions of species and micro and macro and all this stuff is their paradigm model of common ancestry. They have to be able to explain, the radical divergent amount of species from one very, very simple, non-complex type of organism, basically trying to create an encyclopedia out of Bernstein bears by doing nothing but mistakenly repeating words and chunks of words every once in a while until you get an encyclopedia. It's just, that to me is one of the weaker parts of their argument, that you can have simpler life and through a series of errors have more complex life. It's just such a weird thing, but it's one of the things that they believe, and I think it's easy to pick apart.
Yeah,
totally irrational.
I have put the link. Smokey, you can have a look afterwards.
Amen.
And it shows why common ancestry is not true.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, post that up, please. That's beautiful. Thank you.
I've done it.
I've argued with it, with the morphology of it, that we have far too many assumptions in the fossil record because of convergent evolution and the fact that many divergent species might actually develop similar morphological traits. So therefore, we rely too heavily on morphology for speciation. And by the way, that is the whole backbone of common ancestry, is the morphology that's seen in the fossil record. So if you take that apart, if you destroy that, they basically have nothing. They have nothing except for assumptions.
Yeah, and I have started to study what actually gives rise to cellular form, because we have, for example, blood cells, which are circular, but we have also neurons, which have a completely different complex form. Right. And of course, if you want to explain organismal form and shape, you have to start with the cell, which also differentiates to get different forms. And I have put you the link here. You can study it. There are 15 different things that have to be discriminated in the cell. Actually 16, I can list them here. Morphogenesis of eukaryotic cells, structure and shape, cell fate determination, differentiation, that from the first zygote, you have to get the different kind of cells, and that has to be differentiated. How does that happen? And that's a very complex process. And I have listed also the what defines that. Then third, the cell growth and size, cell division counting. How do cells know when to stop self-replicating. If you have, for example, in the human body, each cell replicates about 40 times. If it replicates 1 time more, then you have cancer. Then you have a totally deformed organism. So what defines the cell counting? And of course, that's all based on information. And where does that kind of information come from? And then I go on and on. There are 16 different things. And I am, in this last link, analyzing each of the 16 things that have to be elucidated. And it's very fascinating. It is moving me very much forward to understand these things.
Amen.
Okay, guys.
Beautiful.
It's already 2.5 hours that I'm here in this live chat, and I think I will give a pause. And I think soon John Maddox is starting his live stream.
Did Christian Peasant say anything? He came in the room. I don't. Did he say anything?
No, I didn't really.
No.
I was just listening. I think the conversation is
Christian. I'll tell you what. You get first dibs to come onto my live show tonight and talk. Okay.
No problem, buddy. No problem.
All right, perfect. All right, well, gentlemen, thank you so much. That was good, Tangelo. Thank you for that. God bless you, Gavin.
Thanks, Tangelo.
Okay, guys, I have to end the call. I'm on a phone call here.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Take care, guys.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Bye, guys. Bye.
God bless. God bless. God bless.
Oi, bom dia. Certo. Certo. Tá. lado oposto, isso. Do lado oposto. E esse cliente não está. E esse cliente não está nos Estados Unidos, ele está aqui. Pronto. Então tá bom. Eu vou entrar em contato com esse vendedor e dou uma resposta, viu? Ok? Tá bom. Tá. Valeu. Tá bom. Tá. Oi.